Welcome back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are doing very well out there. Me and Patrick Van Straten are here today at Clubhouse 5. And if you are in London and near Leicester Square and want to watch some beautiful sport, whether that be football, rugby, cricket, you name it, they've got it on here, then make sure you check it out. Clubhouse 5, just off of Leicester Square. PVS, how you doing, mate? How's your week been?
I'm good, man. I watched some football for like the first time ever. I liked it. I think it's going to go far. I think it's going to be popular.
The football.
Yeah.
How'd that football go?
It was all right. Like the Arsenal Bayern game. I mean, we didn't play very well, but I was entertained. Like for the first time, I was just like, is this what it's like to kind of be a neutral? I mean, I say that I went berserk when we scored, but I was kind of like just so relieved to be watching a football match. My kids had gone to bed. It's the middle of the week. I was just like, you know what? Like life is pretty good. I had them both on the monitor being very quiet. So I was like, okay, this is luxury.
Oh, that's very, very sweet. What did you think then of the game in terms of the talking points? There was the Saka possible penalty at the end.
I mean, I thought that because Neuer puts his leg out, like Neuer tries to stop, and at first I thought he had stopped. Like in like watching it live, I was like, I think Neuer stopped that. But then he does put his leg out, and I think Saka would have made contact even if he hadn't thrown his leg into it. But throwing his leg into it makes it, I guess, easier to say it's a dive, even though I think it's both a dive and probably a pen. But I didn't cry about it too much. I just thought Saka should have shot.
And then there was also Tommy T talking about how obviously there's a handball by Gabriel. Right, Raya kind of kicks it over to him. But is it in play kick? Who knows?
But the fact that nobody noticed this during the game, like I just thought we were all like, Gabriel probably just hasn't heard the whistle. Like it's not that big a deal. Like it's kind of like I just thought if this had been given, would in 10 years we talk about this like that Van Persie sending off. Where it was just like, well, technically, like you do get a yellow for that, but we were like, well, he hasn't heard the whistle. Like, I don't know. I just didn't really think it was that big a deal. But you know, Tommy Tuchel and a Tommy Tuchel. Like,
he is indeed, and we're going to be definitely talking about Tommy Tuchel in this video. As you've seen by the title and thumbnail of this video, it's how to replace Jurgen Klopp. I did want to get a Liverpool fan on the video, but basically just couldn't work it out with the few that
there
I was
aren't
messaging.
any, Zach.
There aren't, especially in London as well.
You can't find them anymore.
But yeah, so me and Patrick are going to go through a few things around Liverpool and the kind of situation with Jurgen Klopp leaving. Kind of what is he leaving? Who could be the possible best candidate? We've obviously seen a couple of front runners already, according to reports. We're going to look at the squad for next season and kind of who needs replacing. Obviously, guys with contracts running out, situations that need to be dealt with on that, and any possible signings and what the expectations should be for next season. So let's kick it off then, Patrick Van Straten. We've spoken about on this channel, I can't remember if you were on the video or not, about Jurgen Klopp leaving and how big of a situation that is. And this is huge. Probably, if we think to it, in terms of the Premier League era, we have to look back at kind of Arsene Wenger leaving Arsenal, Sir Alex Ferguson leaving Manchester United. Now, where they rank in kind of important stuff, that's a whole other debate for another time. But for Liverpool, this is really huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a seismic event. Regardless of the kind of length of time he's been there, you know, compared to Wenger, compared to Ferguson, this feels like a different club from the one he took over. I mean, even though they did have that very, very close run at the title under Rodgers, before that they'd had like another period under Dalglish. They'd had Roy Hodgson. Like it did feel like a team that was kind of stumbling around looking for an identity. And obviously, despite the Champions League, you know, 10 years previous, they just hadn't been taken all that seriously by the teams around them. Like if you were to rank the biggest teams in the country at that point, or not the biggest teams, because I know that's a tortured phrase, but the teams that were competing the most, when Klopp turned up, it was, even though United had a couple of bad years, it was United, City, Chelsea, and Arsenal. That's where we were. And on his watch, Liverpool became always first or second best team in the world, I think, during that period. They were incredible. And more importantly, they just had such a distinctive style. Like you watched them, like you saw them. If they were all greyed out and you didn't know who was playing, you would still know that it was Klopp football. And I think that was just so important. Like he rebuilt the identity of the club, and also almost nobody in the game is as good at connecting with the fans as he is as a manager. And Liverpool has always, you know, cried out for that. Liverpool does have I do actually think that Liverpool is a club kind of like no other. Like, it does have a relationship with its city. It does have an identity for its fans. Iconic. It has a sense of its place in its community. And I think Klopp understood that from the start and really kind of got on board with it. What he leaves, I mean, he put a fear factor there that hadn't been felt for a long while. Like, we talk about Anfield, and Anfield was never an easy place to go, but it wasn't that bad. Like, I remember Arsenal going there like with Abu Dhabi and winning 2-0, and it did happen. And since Klopp's been there, it just feels like Anfield is the scariest place you can possibly go in football.
Yeah, I mean, you see the stats all the time about their home record and how tough it is, and maybe when your team has faced them, the last win being a long, long time ago, especially since Klopp's been there. I think you've covered quite a lot in terms of what Klopp's kind of leaving, and that partially makes it tougher for whatever manager comes forward, right? Like we mentioned, Arsene Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson. You only have to look at what happened after them to see how tough it can be when you have such a cult icon figure that has been so big for the club over the last, again, for Liverpool's time, 10 years or so. And what it leads to this new manager come in. Like Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson picked David Moyes. And then you listen to the kind of Gary Nevilles and so on and so forth, or Rio Ferdinands that were there afterwards, and they talk about just wasn't the same. Yeah, they've always had that level of, especially with these players. A lot of these players are Klopp's players. He brought them in. He's the reason they joined the club in the end. And when you are right, Klopp has that connection not just with the fans but with his players. It is very much you guys all are my guys, and we all fight together, we're all one. It's us against the world kind of thing. And so when Klopp leaves and this new random person joins as manager, and he's going, okay, yeah, but I know Klopp did this, but I actually want you to do it a little bit like this. They all go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? And so there are a few worries on that front as well. I'm going to be very interested to see how Liverpool fans react to kind of a new manager, because they have had the kind of creme de la creme and someone like Jurgen Klopp, who is, as you said, connected with the fans, but also just like pumps them, the fist pumps, everything about it kind of going through the game with them. How's it going to be if they maybe get a manager that's a little bit more reserved, or a manager who wants to do that straight away, but then does that feel a little bit fake? If he's trying to just like copy Klopp? I think there's so many different questions that can happen with Klopp leaving and kind of whatever guy comes in. I think it's interesting because there was talks originally about Xabi Alonso. We now know he's going to stay under Bayer Leverkusen, and we'll get onto him in a second. But that was someone that already had a connection with the fans in another way. So I thought that could have helped. With a few of these other guys that we'll talk about, there's actually maybe the opposite, where someone like Thomas Tuchel, for instance, was manager of Chelsea and had tough matches against Jurgen Klopp and his Liverpool, and whether that kind of plays an opposite effect if he was to join Liverpool this coming season. But yes, let's get on then to the manager possibilities. I did mention Xabi Alonso there, Pat. He was very much the front runner originally, obviously doing incredible things with Bayer Leverkusen so far this season. Could possibly go on to do a form of a treble as well, and obviously destroy the Bundesliga as it looks like. I think actually this weekend he might be able to win it.
Yeah, they're two. Yeah. They're 16 points ahead of Bayern, and there are 6 games left.
Really,
so they need
impressive.
3 points, or for Bayern, I guess, to drop points, for them to be like mathematically secure.
Makes sense. Firstly, then, obviously he's come out and say he's staying. Bayern Munich were interested in him. Liverpool were interested in him. What do you make of Xabi Alonso staying and kind of not taking the Liverpool job and staying at Leverkusen for another year? What do you think?
I think it's fine. Like, I don't know. I think that if he wins the league this season, especially if he wins it unbeaten for a club who've never won a league title in their history, you are expected to walk into the next club as like the saviour. Like, especially if Liverpool either win the title this season, they're either going to win the title or come very close to winning a title. And if they're like, this guy is like appointed, like he is ordained to come here. He used to play for the club. He's done this incredible feat, like in a league that everybody thought was unwinnable, basically. People are going to expect him to put up a title challenge immediately. And I wouldn't particularly want that. And as for Bayern, I just don't think it's a particularly interesting managerial job. Like, if you're late in your career, maybe you haven't won a Champions League or something, then like, sure. But I don't think it's that interesting as a coach, the Bayern job. And I also think that there's probably a generation of guys there who need to disappear to make that job a little bit more attractive.
Yeah,
Maybe not a generation, but I do think that, having people like Thomas Muller around is not always as helpful as you would think that it is.
Even Manuel Neuer.
Yeah, I think when those guys are gone, like, you might be able to put your imprint on the club.
Then you've got Oliver Kahn in the background.
You've got a million guys who played for the club in like the 70s and 80s who are all around like doing crime and like telling you what to do. But like, I don't know. I see why he wouldn't really take one of those, especially if he just wants the Real Madrid job. Yeah. Like, I mean, we don't really know which of these clubs he feels most connected to, but we have a reasonable guess that maybe it is Real Madrid.
Yeah.
And so I think he can just afford to take his time on it. And plus, I'd look at the Liverpool squad right now, and I'm not sure if I'm Xabi Alonso that it's set up for me. So I think the interesting thing is it's actually quite a good time for Klopp to leave. Not in terms of Liverpool like continuing to compete for titles every season, but they are in transition, and next year they were going to have to be something other than what they are this year, one way or another. So Klopp's football this year has been very different from what we've seen before. His midfield getting far fewer touches, like about 30 touches fewer a game, relative to when you had Thiago, Henderson, Fabinho. Like now, when you've got Jones as a boss and McAllister, like guys like that in there, about 30 fewer passes a game, which is a lot less.
Yeah.
And they're also insanely direct. So Klopp has done a great job fixing this defence about as well as anybody could have, but the defence is still just like so-so. Klopp's done a really good job to get it to so-so, I think. But what he's done this season, I think, is try to play a style of football that maximises the talent he has. And that means that they go back to front incredibly fast. Yes. So if you look at direct speed, so it's like kind of meters towards goal per second, but basically it's just a measure of like how fast you're moving up the pitch. Generally speaking, top sides are really slow. So City are the slowest in the league. Arsenal are second or third slowest. Even a team like Newcastle, who you think of as like very direct, they were 7th slowest last time I looked. So if you have the ball, you're expected to win games. Teams obviously sit a bit deeper. You can move more slowly. You have to pick them apart. Liverpool were the 3rd most direct team in the league. Like, they were so fast going towards goal. Now,
who's number 1 in that?
I think
you can remember.
I think it was Everton or Luton last time I looked. And certainly the other weird thing about them is that only Everton, Luton and Fulham attempt more long balls than Liverpool. So Liverpool are like, we're just hitting our forwards. We're hitting our forwards. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's obviously been very successful for them this season. But there is not a top side who has played that kind of football consistently, like over years. And Klopp hasn't played that kind of football consistently. So I think one way or another, he was going to have to say, how are we going to play next year? And it's a little bit of a difficult question because there were times when it was Mane, Firmino, Salah, where their passing was also insanely tight. Like, they would go back to front very quickly. They do it in like 5 or 6 passes, and those were passes that no other team in the world would pull off because those players knew exactly where their teammates were going to be. Well, now you've got guys in there who are not as secure in possession as that. Gakpo has a very low career pass completion, about 70%, because he's kind of an all-or-nothing guy. Like, he plays Hail Marys, or at least he did in the Eredivisie. Darwin Núñez has a career pass percentage about 65%, because basically he doesn't pass. Like, about 40% of his touches are shots. So this is a team that has become a different sort of thing in order to stay competitive this season. And next season, somebody was going to have to put a new kind of mark on it and turn it back into, they still have a lot of possession, but turn it back into a more of a settled possession side. I think it makes sense for Klopp to say, well, I'm tired. And if somebody is going to mold this team in a new image, it should be the next coach rather than me.
Yeah.
When I'm probably going to leave, if not now, then in a year or two anyway.
That makes sense. Well, let's find out then about some of the guys who could be taking the helm at Anfield. And the one this week that's really been the front runner, I think we've seen a lot of talk about him actually kind of agreeing personal details between Liverpool, the talks of a 3-year deal being successful at the moment, is Ruben Amorim. I think this is someone who, over the last year now, has had a lot more traction around his name and had a lot more kind of questions around him. He is obviously been also spoken about with a buyout clause or a lot of money being paid for him. Originally, I think it is, if you're a Portuguese club, around 30 million euros, but 20 million euros if you're outside of the Portuguese division. And then apparently on top of that, there is like a pact or a gentleman's agreement that if a big club comes in, so Liverpool, you'd expect to kind of tick that box, that it would come a lot more cheaper, around £8 million as well, to get his services. And this is someone who is super young. He's only 38, I think, maybe a little bit younger. Started his career, I think, around 34 years old. He was actually managing in the third division of Portugal in 2018. He then made a move to become the reserve manager for Braga. Their manager got sacked 3 months after he was hired. He then became the first team manager of Braga, and then very quickly became the sporting manager. And it's all gone really well. He's gone to win the leagues. I mean, he's doing fantastically well. He's playing really attractive football. There has been a lot of talk about him so far at the moment, Pat, but I don't think it raises a lot of questions, because we've seen him most of the time, it feels like all the time, to be honest, play three at the back, and translating that to Liverpool is going to be very different to what we've seen. Not to say that Liverpool couldn't do it, and not to say that it actually wouldn't suit them, but it does raise questions about maybe needing another centre-back, maybe needing what happens to Trent. Does Van Dijk kind of go into the middle because he has a player kind of step into midfield sometimes? It raises a lot of questions, but do you think this would be a good hire, first and foremost?
Yeah, I think he's a good manager. But you're right. Like, it's not just a hire that's made straightforwardly. It's a hire that's also made with an eye on how we're going to develop the squad to make sense for this guy. He is kind of unknown, I suppose. Like, yeah, great pedigree in Portugal. Won 3 cups in a row. Like, one with Braga and then 2 with Sporting. And he's done pretty well in Europe as well, I think. So, I don't know. Like, when we're not really going to go into his playing style like that much, because I don't really see the point to some degree. Like, I mean, like, you're better off going and watching his team play football. But he can play like a dominant possession team. He could play pretty directly in Europe as well. Like, he seems reasonably tactically flexible, and I think that that's true basically of this entire generation of young managers. What's interesting about it, first of all, is that it's not a stopgap. They could have gone and said, right, we're going to go and get someone for 2 or 3 years. Like, I did a podcast on this with Pete Dorman a few weeks ago, Unseen Incidents with Patrick and Pete. You can find us on Patreon. And I talked about, as a stopgap, someone like Spalletti, who I think actually plays kind of Liverpool football, is cool. And, and like, I also think the Napoli job has a lot of similarities to the Liverpool job, even just in the way that Naples is in Italy is kind of analogous to how Liverpool is in England, I think. Yeah. But has always played really attractive, like, aggressive front foot football. You probably could have got him and said, right, we'll have 2 years of you, and then we try again for Alonso or see who else is on the market. And they've decided not to do that. That's interesting. I think that the 3 at the back thing is not too big a concern, because I think formation these days is honestly a thing that you tell the TV. You say to Sky, this is our formation, and they're like, great, we need a formation that, like, we can look at and we understand. And then we're going to talk about that incessantly. But, like, Arsenal play like a back 4. When Arsenal are actually playing in games, how often are they building up with a 4 at the back?
Yeah, true.
Never.
Very true.
They're building up with a 2 at the back or a 3 at the back. Almost always a 3. Like, that is what they do. But then it becomes a 2, because it becomes like a 2-3-5, or it's a 3-2-5, and, like, it's all functional. It's the same way that, Man City won the treble last season with John Stones. John Stones is starting as centre-back and walking into midfield. So what's your formation? Is it a 3 at the back? Is it a 4 at the back? Like, I don't really know. And I think it's just understood that teams have different formations in and out of possession, and teams play different ways according to their opponents. And I think that, honestly, when you have a player who is not a problem, but extremely specific in Trent Alexander-Arnold, especially if Salah goes, which I think we'll talk about, then saying maybe we are going to play 3 centre-backs plus Trent, and Trent goes into midfield, is maybe not the worst way to deal with him. I think that's kind of broadly what England might be considering. And then it would mean, okay, rather than having to completely rejig the squad in some crazy way, we actually can just buy like a left-sided centre-back, and that's not that hard to find right now. And Van Dijk becomes a central centre-back, which I think is pretty good for him at this stage of his career. I think a load of that stuff would work for them. So I don't think it's that much of an issue, or at least I don't think it's something you have to get too hung up on. They were going to have to make signings this summer.
Yeah.
And if you think that you can't get, like your ideal DM, maybe you can get your ideal left-sided centre-back. And in that case, it might be a bit more sensible.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I always remember when, was it Motta, who obviously looks like he might be getting the Juve job?
Yeah.
Described a formation as a 2-4-4-2, and everyone lost their minds.
Yeah.
Because he did it rather than obviously bottom up, he went from left to right.
It was so
and
weird.
Everyone lost their minds. And I think that is football is a very fluid thing. It's been fluid for a long time. But in the last, 5-6 years, I do think you're right. I think managers are just saying, I think, I actually remember Thomas Tuchel coming out and being like, yeah, we're playing through at the back, but we're not playing through at the back.
Yeah.
And everyone being like, what does this mean?
I think everyone thinks it used to just be like Bielsa who talked like this. Like Guardiola obviously thought like this, but never really said it. Probably because he thought I just can't bother to explain to you. But basically, football isn't really about formation that you set up with and stick with, right? It's about zones being occupied and roles within those zones. So if this guy plays here, then he needs to cover the left channel. Is that guy a left back? Is he a left centre back? Is he a midfielder dropping deeper? These are all open questions. But ultimately, these days, we've talked for a long, long time about how centre backs are way more athletic and skillful on the ball than they ever used to be. Keepers are better on the ball, and so they become part of the build-up as well. What does this do to the game? Well, it means that you don't have to get too hung up on this guy plays with a back three, unless they are slightly old-fashioned, and a bit more of an ideologue where they're like, no, I play the same way. I play the same way, and I want a number 10 who's a number 10. I want a left back who's a real up and down left back. No one cares anymore, man.
Yeah, it's very much changed. I think another thing we should talk about Amorim, and this is something which I think this is big for the Liverpool fans. A lot of sporting fans are big plaudits of his man management and kind of communication. That kept coming up about apparently he speaks very, very well. He connects with the fans very, very easily. I think this is something that is super important for whoever if they are trying to get someone who's going to be another long-term manager for Liverpool, that is going to be quite a key figure here. As you mentioned earlier, these are fans here who want to have a connection to the manager. Sure. They don't want someone to kind of be quite shielded and blocked off and not really interacting and caring about the city and the club. So that is really interesting. So we'll see what happens with Amorim. I do agree. I think right now, looking at the rest of them, this is maybe the most interesting one that could work out for the long-term future.
Sure.
Some other managers that are also out there and being spoken about as well. Nagelsmann.
Yeah.
Now, he's in charge of Germany until at least the 14th of July. They've got the Euros as well. And he wouldn't only be available then 1 month before the Premier League comes back. It feels like, personally, if you're looking for a manager to kind of take on this new regime of Liverpool, and as you said, they're not going for a stopgap if they're being so highly touted to be going for someone like Ruben Amorim, then getting a manager in for this new era 1 month before the Prem starts feels a little bit crazy to me. I mean, look, at max, it's going to be 3 months when you get this manager in anyway, so okay, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but those 2 months, I think, those 2 added months are going to be really, really important. Try and have a big say in what players you want to be added to the squad. You can't be doing that whilst also focusing on a national team that's got to play the Euros week in, week out for a month, and then turn up for Liverpool training 3 weeks after that.
But don't you think that if they said Nagelsmann's our guy, and we're appointing him now, he could go in there and get to know the players and do a little bit of conversation with the backroom staff, before he gets to the point that he has to focus on the Euros.
But I don't think he does that, because by the time that happens, he has to be focusing on the Euros. Right now, they're not going to let any other manager come in whilst they're in a title race and they're in the run-in and whatever with Jurgen Klopp. I think until Jurgen Klopp until the last day of the Premier League, that's when they go, okay, whoever this new manager is, you can come in and say hello. Probably wouldn't even do that. They'll probably let the players have their time off or do their national team stuff until they come in. But at least if it was a manager that wasn't a national team manager, they behind the scenes can meet the staff. They can meet the directors, the sporting directors, whatever it might be, and kind of put their plan in place about what they want to do. I just think Nagelsmann is too busy at the moment, especially with a Germany side that's starting to look like they're working.
How much are you doing when you're not with the team? Like, you presumably have your tactical plan and you're looking at the players, you go and watch the players, but like, Gareth Southgate just goes and watches like 6 games a week. Like I'm not saying that there's not work to be done, but like, I'm not sure what the manager actually can be doing in all those in-between times.
No,
like
okay.
If you're not working with the players and you're not working with the players, then there's a limit to how much you can prepare. And I just think, you know, if you said to Nagelsmann or Spalletti, who's in the same position, like, we're going to get you in, and you're going to come and you're going to meet the backroom staff and you're going to say like, well, these are the player profiles I need and we'll talk to you about that and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't really see how that would be that much of a problem so long as the National Federation didn't lose their minds about it. And frankly, they shouldn't. Like, Italy and Germany are lucky to have the coaches they have. I don't think they can possibly think like Nagelsmann's here for like 20 years or whatever, like the Spanish Federation apparently did with Lopetegui. So I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. Again, I think all this stuff is like stuff that could be a big deal.
Okay.
But not if the club just says it's not. Like, if Klopp came out and he was just like, this is who's going to manage the club next, and like, we have huge faith in him, he's a great coach. On the plus side as well, he's not playing for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Like, if Nagelsmann were at a club team and Liverpool fans could watch them every week, and then they went on a bad run and started losing because their manager was leaving, they'd be like, oh, Jesus, like, we don't want this guy. At least Nagelsmann and Spalletti are just sitting on the sidelines and no one gets to see what they're doing. So, I don't know. I don't think it's that bad, but like, I understand it's not perfect for the summer.
Yeah.
But I think you could at least get them in now. Whereas if you were to a point like De Zerbi or Frank...
Yeah, it becomes a lot harder.
Okay, they're coming in the summer, but you're like, they are not going to think about it at all until May.
True. Yeah, very true.
You know, Nagelsmann can have a month thinking about it now.
They're probably too busy on his skateboard, to be honest, half the time.
Yeah, he's too busy doing kickflips. But like,
imagine that in Liverpool town, trying to go down.
Oh my God.
We'll see what happens. But okay, footballing wise,
Yeah.
Nagelsmann becomes manager of Liverpool.
He'd have been good.
How does
He'd
that
be
work
good.
out? Does that work out long term?
I don't see why not. Because
And also, what
Nagelsmann
is long term nowadays?
probably long term is probably 4 years.
Yeah, okay.
4 years plus.
Okay.
Like, Nagelsmann, I think, is a really good coach, and certainly he'd get the attack like pumping. I also just think that like Nagelsmann's, when Eddie Howe was at Bournemouth, Bournemouth were legitimately crap, and people said Howe can do more. And I don't think that was really true at the time, but he did go off and learn. He went off to Atletico Madrid and he went and studied. Like, he obviously became, I think a pretty excellent manager. I don't see why people don't have that attitude to Nagelsmann. Like, Nagelsmann's super young.
Yeah, really young.
And he's more than capable of taking a couple of years and improving his defensive skills. Like, when Klopp went to Liverpool, I don't think he was as good a manager as he is now at all. I think he was a great manager, but now I think he's been one of the top two. He's been the second best manager in the world now for like 10 years, basically. Well, I don't see any reason why Nagelsmann can't turn into that as well. He's so young that there's plenty of time to develop. So all he'd need is to get the team functioning to a good enough level in order to buy that time. Now, in a very competitive Premier League, it's unclear how easy that would be, but I don't see why Liverpool can't say, yeah, we're going to finish like 3rd or 4th next season, like under Nagelsmann. And he's quite flexible,
charismatic
in the style of play. Yeah, I mean, I do think that he'd maybe need somebody to be like, we need to polish you up. You wear a club suit now, you know, or you wear like a tracksuit. We're not doing. It's not a clown show, like, because I do think that sort of stuff is distracting, and I think Liverpool fans would hate it. And I think that if he turns up in his like, you know, his Glenn Check suit or whatever, like his kind of top man special, I just think people are going to say, this guy's a joke. And honestly, in the early days, that is such a problem. In the early days, you have to convince people you're a serious person in order to buy the time you need to make the changes you need to make. If people start thinking you're a clown straight away, it's so hard to come back from it.
Well, this is why press conferences, I think, actually are quite important for these guys. The first 6 months or so, especially if results go really well, it's easy, right? Like, if they're winning games and doing really, and they're battling for top 4 straight away, I think you're fine. Like, you go, yeah, we played really well, whatever. I think if Liverpool have a season where it is a little bit down and maybe they drop out of the top 4, whatever it might be, and maybe they lose to City, they lose to Arsenal, they lose to United, something like that. Those press conferences are going to be really big, where you can kind of be like, I think I personally I don't think someone like Pochettino is like that well this year, where you got to be careful on what you say, because one, you don't want to annoy the media kind of side, but that's not the biggest thing in the world. But two, you don't want to annoy the fans. You don't want to get it wrong with the fans, and suddenly this project that's meant to take a little while now has become this thing where you've said, yeah, we want to win trophies straight away this season, and now expectations have changed.
Yeah.
Okay, then, from one German manager to another one, Thomas Tuchel. Obviously, he's leaving Bayern Munich currently at the end of the season. I'm pretty sure it will stay that way as well. It has been a disappointing season. Doesn't look like he's going to be winning any trophies. What do we feel like with Tommy T? Because it's been a very weird career, I think, overall. You can look back at the time at Dortmund, and that was successful, but ended poorly with the kind of boardroom. Then he went to PSG, and again, partially successful, made it to a Champions League final, but ended poorly with the boardroom. Went to Chelsea, did really well in the Premier League, did really well in the Champions League, won it, ended badly in the boardroom. Bayern Munich ended badly in the boardroom.
Yeah, but I think the last two, firstly, I'd say are like not really on him.
Yeah.
I think those are unwinnable situations at Bayern and Chelsea.
Yeah.
Dortmund, a bit less so. I mean, of all the managers that we're talking about, he is the best manager. He is the best available manager. But I do think he's kind of unappointable. Like, the fact that he's already been at a Premier League club, the fact that he is known for being difficult.
Yeah.
I just don't think Liverpool want a bar of that. I think they want somebody who's going to come in and it's all like feel good factor. And I think it's too much of a narrative as well. They'll be like, followed Klopp at Mainz, followed him at Dortmund,
followed him to the Premier League.
And if he were following him to the Premier League for the first time, then maybe. But this is a guy who's perceived as having like flamed out at PSG and Chelsea and Bayern, and now we're getting him. Like, I don't know. Like, is this good enough? In reality, I actually think he's still a pretty excellent manager. He's also known for not having as tight a hold on transfers as some managers do. Like, he is actually happy to work with a backroom team who can like develop targets for him. He wants some say, but Klopp has always had a big say.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that he's not like a dictator, but I do think that he expects a basic level of respect, and I do think that he expects that when he says this is the target I want, the club are going to do something about it. Now, actually, Liverpool might be a way better place to do that than Bayern, who have their own ideas about this sort of stuff. And he only was given a 2-year contract there as well, which I think was, saying we're not sure about you.
I think you've seen that a lot more recently as well. There are quite a few managers that are only getting 2 years. Yeah, because also the payouts.
But as a coach, I'd be like, so you're telling me I relocate my family to a different part. I mean, admittedly, Tuchel is Bavarian, but I relocate my family to a different part of the world, and you say, well, we'll give you a 2-year contract. And it's like, in the meantime, I have to put like my kid in a new school or like move away from my wife for like 6 months. No, I don't know. If I were a manager, I'd be like, I expect some stability. I don't think that's unreasonable, but he is difficult. I just don't think it will happen. It'd be like if Spurs didn't have a manager, Tuchel was a manager they should hire. He'd be like a manager who's like, kind of above their level. Like, he's an amazing manager. Like, but you just can't do it because you're like, we've had too many ex-Chelsea managers. He's too much of a pain in the arse. Like, we can't afford it, all the baggage. And I think it's a real pity. I think Tuchel could do with taking a Bayer Leverkusen style job, even at a lower level in the Premier League, potentially, and just doing like 3 or 4 years of just like no drama.
He needs a bit of stability.
High quality coaching. Yeah, like if like Inzaghi left Inter and they just hired Tuchel.
Yeah.
I mean, into the basket case. But they were like, right, you're just going to get 4 years. And he was just there like doing a solid, quiet job during that time. Then I do think at the end of it, we'd be like, yeah, okay, Tuchel is like, we'd appreciate him for who he is again.
Yeah. I was thinking as well, he does not everywhere, because I don't think it's quite happened at Bayern Munich, but he does normally develop a really strong connection with the fans as well, which would work really well for Liverpool. It does also look like he is Barcelona's number one.
I think that'd be great. I think if he went to Barcelona and Barcelona were like, we are not going to mess with your position, but realistically, here are your financial constraints. Like, we are going to have to, like, if they bring him in and they immediately sell like Frankie de Jong, I think he'll just go berserk. But if they say to him, if they say to him in advance, we have to sell De Jong and we have to do X, Y, and Z over the next couple of years. But here's what we're going to give you. Like, this is the amount of money we're going to give you. These are the academy players.
Yeah.
And we're not going to interfere on the player side. Like, maybe then at least if you're like upfront from the beginning, it's kind of what you were saying before about setting expectations as a manager too.
Yeah.
Like, if you go in and you say, this is going to be painful. Like, if Ten Hag had come in and said pain, like, it's going to be pain, guys. Like, pain for like 2 or 3 seasons and you're not going to like it. And we're going to play some dull shit. And we're going to, like, very slowly evolve. And we are going to have some bad losses. And it's going to suck. But the promised land is there. Then I do think a lot of fans are going to complain. But at least you can go back and say, I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
Like, I told you all along that this was happening. So if they have that sort of expectation between Tuchel and Barcelona, I think it's fine. I just think, if I'm Tuchel, I look at it and I just think, well, this is probably like the highest level job I can get. But I've done now, this is completing my tour of the biggest basket case clubs in Europe. PSG, Chelsea, Bayern, Barca is honestly like the nightmare for like dealing with psychos who don't know what they're talking about. Like, I'd just be like, I cannot deal with like somebody else's kid who like writes my contract in crayon. I just can't do it. I can't do it. Like,
I do. Yeah,
I need to work with a pro.
When you put it like that, I do feel for him. But yeah, no, I do agree. I think it's something that if it did happen would be good, but I don't see it happening. Let's talk about then 2 other ones who are both in the Premier League currently, De Zerbi and Thomas Frank.
Yeah.
I know you're a big Thomas Frank fan.
I love
Thomas
Thomas Frank.
Obviously, he's come out recently as well and said about how he does. They were asking why you can sign a new contract at Bayern Munich, at Brighton. Though I think he's actually on the list for Bayern Munich. Anyway, are you going to sign a new contract at Brighton? He said no, and they said why. He's like, well, I need to talk to Brighton and find out what our like expectations are, and are we going to spend money? Are we not going to sell every player that I make half decent? So what do you think of those 2? Because I think it's really interesting there, where I don't know. I think Thomas Frank, if they had signed him, if someone had signed him last season, I think it's all very positive. I think now, with obviously Brentford not doing as well as they have done this campaign, I think the perceived image around him is actually a lot more negative. And I think people will go, well, he's not even the level to be managing a club like Liverpool, who should be battling for top 4 week in, week out. Whereas De Zerbi is someone who I still think has a little bit of credit in the bank at the moment for that. What do you think about those 2? Because I do agree that obviously Thomas Frank has had to deal with a lot of different issues as well, like losing his number 1 goalkeeper, not having his star striker for the half the season, so on and so forth, which make a big difference. But I do feel like it's a big jump, this, to go to somewhere like Liverpool.
Yeah, but I mean, at some point you're gonna make that jump. Like it's hard to get managers who've come through the intermediate stage anymore, because there are relatively few intermediate clubs. I'd actually say Brentford are an intermediate club, and so are Brighton. Like, these are natural places to hire a manager from. Otherwise, you expect to be plucking someone out of like Borussia Dortmund, it's not really going to happen anymore. Partially because Borussia Dortmund don't have a good manager, but there are relatively few of those guys.
Yeah.
And Thomas Frank has other things going for him. Like, Thomas Frank played possession football in the Championship and has played quite interesting counter-attacking football at times in the Premier League. He's played lots of different formations. He's developed young players. He's dealt with players being lost. I think he's actually excellent in the press conference. Like what you were talking about before, Thomas Frank, I think, is going to sit there and be really honest with you.
Yeah.
But not honest like Tuchel, where he's just like, don't trust the club. Like they said that they give me 50 quid and they gave me a tenner. Like Thomas Frank's just going to say this is an imperfect process and I'm replacing a huge coach. And I think Thomas Frank always seems completely confident in his abilities as a coach, but without being arrogant. There are a lot of managers who, and I think there are a lot of fans as well, who think that basically being successful is about constantly talking about how you're the best. I just don't think it's true. And I think Frank would say, this is a big job and we need to rebuild. And this situation they were in last season was this. But we are developing a new style of football. I can't play knockoff Klopp football. All I can do is play authentic Thomas Frank football. I actually think that he'd be fantastic when it comes to the man management and the press side of it. Really, really good. And I'm desperate to see him get a chance at a higher level. He'll also be fine with you developing the squad the way you want. He's obviously dealt with that at Brentford. and Liverpool are going to do it on a much higher level. So if Liverpool are like, yeah, we're going to go out and buy you like a £60 million DM, he'll be like, cool. Great. Like, I'm used to you bringing me someone from like the Latvian league. This is great. So I don't know. In a way, I think I'd be more positive about him than Djellab in a way. Okay. Because Djellab, I think it's just a shorter track record, like at the highest level, and
even Brighton have dropped off this year as well. Like people mentioned Brentford drop off, Brighton have.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough for him for exactly the same reasons. Like if I were a coach in that position, I'd be like, I want to leave now. Like this is enough. But he's still done some excellent player development
as well, doesn't he?
And some player development there has been fantastic. Like Djellab, like has been so much better than you. Like some of the stuff, really good. And brought in Mitoma in the middle of last season and just like absolutely exploded. Like Ferguson as well. Even like okay, he's having a backward season this year, but that happens. Players of his age happens with players like 3 years older than his age. Yeah. But with Djellab, I do just feel there's a fragility in their football that I don't necessarily see in Frank's football. Like I know Brentford are like basically down in the relegation battle this season, but they're not really going to get relegated. They've been incredibly unlucky. I think they're about 15 points off their expected points according to Understat. Like they have them at like sort of 10th best team in the league. I think that's like a fair reflection of where they are, and given that they invest nothing, I think that's pretty remarkable. But when I see them, I don't see Brentford really get humiliated very often, whereas I do think Djellab ball has more. It has more boom or bust potential, like where sometimes they smash a team and sometimes they get absolutely pumped. He's going to play attractive football, but I think Frank could do that too. And so I don't know. I in a way, I think that if you gave me just a straight up choice of those two coaches, I'd go Frank.
It's interesting with those two because I think the other side with Djellab too is he's a very hothead. Yeah. And I don't know I think for what Liverpool are about to go through, I don't know if a hothead is someone they want there.
Sure. Like Thomas Frank seems so chill.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, well, he's intense though.
But like, he's not like
he doesn't lose his temper.
But I feel like you kind of know what Thomas Frank's going to say in a press conference, like whereas Djellab, like
he's a pro.
As say a sporting director, right?
Sure,
Whereas
that's true.
you could put Djellab, say you've just lost to a team, whatever, and you put Djellab into that press conference, I wouldn't know what on earth he's going to say, and that would worry me as a sporting director.
Yeah, but again, I do think like we underestimate like how grateful they are to be there.
Yeah, that
like,
is true.
If I'm going up from like, if I'm basically going from like Ukraine to Brighton to Liverpool, then I'm like, this is sick. This is the big time. And I'm not going to whine about it. Yeah. I'd be like, yes, I have my issues, but we have them behind the scenes because I'm still like the manager of Liverpool, which is like one of the most prestigious, like arguably the most prestigious managerial position in football, like, or in football history, I would say, like given the people that you succeed in that job.
I think also if you hire one of those two, I think there is a level of between everyone's thinking, everyone that views Liverpool, whatever, or even as a fan, where you go, okay, we are building here. Whereas there are slight, like for instance, if you hire a Tuchel and even Amorim, who has won, trophies already, there's maybe an expectation of we are going to still be battling for the title and so on and so forth. Like Tuchel's come up many times saying, I don't want to be building a project. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be spending years building and then battling. I want to be battling from the off. Whereas I think if you get in a Djellab or a Thomas Frank, you can maybe have the first year, even the second year, as an expectation between people being, okay, we're battling for top four.
Klopp just doesn't want to do it again, right?
Yeah.
Like he did at the beginning, and you're just like, I can't finish 8th. I can't like finish, they're not going to finish 8th, but I can't finish like 8th again and then 5th. I just can't do it. Those guys would be like, we're probably going to finish 5th at worst. Like, that's fine, definitely. And then 2 years after, we are really like going for the title. Yeah, I think that it gives you a little bit of grace as well. Like if you hire Frank or Djellab and people are slightly underwhelmed, then if the first season is a little bit disappointing, okay, it could cut two ways. Either people are like, this guy just isn't good enough, but you can also say like, well, we all had our reservations and like it's a different style of football. And so long as the manager's willing to come out and be honest about that again, I think it's not too much of an issue. Yeah.
I think it's good. Okay, Pat, if I went to, you had out of the, 5 managers we spoke about there, you had to hire one, who would it be? Tomorrow, man. The contract is there. Put it in front of them, Pat. What name is on that contract?
Like I say, I think like Tuchel is the best. But oh God, I just don't know how good Amorim is. He might be incredible. and he might be all right. You know, like, and the thing that the problem is, you could get like the 10th best manager in the world, and it's still going to be a downgrade because you've had the second best manager in the world for such a long time.
Very true.
So Tuchel is like the smallest guaranteed drop. Do I just give Tommy C like 2 years?
You can give it Tommy C if you want. You can give it Tommy C.
You know what? I might do Nagelsmann.
Nagelsmann, okay.
I don't even care. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think anyone here is like a genuinely terrible choice.
Yeah.
And I do think that if you get Nagelsmann in and you're just like, right, we are going to give you a project here, and then you can always sack him.
Yeah.
You know, so what if you sack him? Like, it's fine.
That's what I'm really interested in. Is will this become now the next 5 years for Liverpool? Basically, in the next 5 years, will Liverpool have 3 managers in that time? Which I'm quite interested to see. But guys, let us know what you think of the managers there. Have we missed out anyone as well? Let us know in the comments below. All right, Pat, let's have a look then at the squad for next season. Because contract-wise, not too bad. The only ones who are going into their final year next year would be Virgil van Dijk and Mohammed Salah. So 2 quite big players. But otherwise, not too bad. I think there are a couple that are also going whose contracts run out in 2026, but that's not things we have to worry about just yet, like Kanate is 2026. But Virgil van Dijk and Mohammed Salah. Salah, there's an interesting thing at the moment because rumours of a £100 million Saudi bid going to be coming in the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the level of bid where you'd accept selling him, Pat, as well? Like, if Saudi actually came, or if a club came in and were like, okay, here's 40 million.
No, I think I don't know.
60.
God, that's a lot of money. Yeah, I think like 70 probably is my
to sell Salah.
Yeah, because I just think that like clean slate straight away. Like,
yeah.
I know that Liverpool fans will be like, but if we're in the Champions League next season, we want to compete, and if we've just won the title or come close, then we want to compete, and like selling Salah is a problem for that. But it's just like, this is the situation. This is the perennial question, right? Which is like, you keep hold of a guy to win now, and if you don't win now, then you just lost all the money. And Liverpool are not in a position where they can throw away 70 mil. Like, you do actually need that money. They need the guy who comes after Salah. So I do think I sell him if you get a bid of that level, just because you actually have a load of really good attackers. You really do. And you should be able to put together a decent attack from the players that you've got. And I do
spend money to go and get another one.
And I do think it's easier to say goodbye to Klopp and Salah. Expectations are low. What comes next? And look at Spurs this season. You know, like, people talked about them losing Kane forever, and actually they got a new coach. They played a new style. They got in some good signings, and it's just been been fine. Like, it's been fine. Like, your club doesn't revolve around one player. I truly believe that if somebody played there instead of Salah, they would not get as many goals and assists, but they'd still get a decent number of goals and assists.
Yeah, I do agree. And also, like, I think it might become maybe a little bit more shared around too. Like, you might see Núñez pick up a few more. You might see, maybe Dominic Szoboszlai comes out to the right wing.
Sure.
You never know what could happen in that front. I actually missed another player there as well. I don't know how I did that. Trent Alexander-Arnold's contract also runs out in 2025.
Yeah, that's an issue.
This feels like, I feel like with Virgil, he will stay. I think with Trent, I think there's a bit more questions there, because I think Real Madrid will come in. And I think then things become very difficult for what Trent does. Because if you're Trent Alexander-Arnold, right, and Real Madrid have just signed Mbappe,
and Alphonso Davies probably as well.
They've got a bunch of other incredible talent there. Bellingham's going, oh my God, it's so amazing here. Like, it's incredible. And then Liverpool have offered you, like, a 5-year deal, probably get captaincy as well. But goodness, like, no one knows quite what's going to happen here with this new manager. Like, what do you say? I think it's really hard to say.
You're definitely like, I'm going to Real Madrid. Like, I think you've just got to as well. Like, you know, you're young enough that you can still have a great career there, and you've already had a great career at Liverpool where you've won everything. I would probably take that. On the other hand, you know, Trent is a Scouser. Like, he might just say, like, no, I want to stick around. I think he probably would go. And I think that that's a position that's really hard to fill. Centre backs, actually, now there are quite a lot around, and it's not easy to find a Van Dijk, but it is quite easy to find two good young centre backs. And Liverpool at points this season have been, you know, obviously muddling along with guys like Kwanzaa. You know, so he's the guy that I'd really try and lock down. I'd sell Salah. I would give Van Dijk obviously a new contract, but Trent is the one where I'd be like, oh God. Because like Salah, you can fade a little bit if you've got Trent playing. If Trent's fit, then the loss of Salah will be not felt as much creatively. If Trent and Salah go at the same time, then you're like, oh boy, like we need like one of these guys. We need Szoboszlai or Harvey Elliott or someone to go supernova.
And also, again, I just think back from the fan point of view, like you've just lost Jurgen Klopp, Salah's gone, like Trent's now moved to Real Madrid. And even Van Dijk will sit there then and go like, what do you want me to do? Like, if this club's calling me or whatever, like maybe I'll move on as well. I think it could be, that could be really, really dangerous, I think, for any new manager to come in. To another degree, though, I think, as you mentioned with the Spurs point of view, like, essentially it is a fresh slate here to do whatever you want now to the squad. And also you've got the excuse of, well, you're only going to get Trent if they offer over 100 million. Realistically, as I said, you're probably only selling Salah if you're getting 70 million.
I don't think they'll buy Trent though, right? They'll just wind it down and get him
you
on
think
a free.
maybe for the year after? Okay, maybe. Well, then at least you got Trent for another year. But point being, I was going to move it to, well, let's see at what replacements we can bring into the squad. I think right wing would be somewhere where they would look towards. I do agree they've got players that can play there, but I think even just from a kind of outside looking in point of view, they need to make a summer signing in time, like a big one. If you're losing someone like Salah, you need to bring in someone that's kind of like a exciting name. Now, right wing's an interesting position because I feel like there's a lot more exciting left wingers out there in the world, and there's a lot tougher right wingers to find, especially that are left footed too. Like Liverpool aren't going to be going and getting Saka. Not going to happen.
Probably not.
And so the other ones out there make it a little bit interesting. And again, I wonder whether they would be enough of a signing to really kind of please the Liverpool fan bases. Like, for instance, Kubo is really interesting, like a fun player, but he's probably not going to be having the numbers that someone... To be fair, not many, if any, player is going to have the numbers that Mohammed Salah had at Liverpool. But I don't know if he quite is enough. Maybe you have to make 2 signings in that position to really kind of give yourself a good chance. I do know for a fact that Brian Mbeumo is someone that Liverpool were really interested in the summer. Okay. And I think it was, if they hadn't, who'd they bring in the end? I think it might have been bringing in Szoboszlai, and it didn't happen. But they were super interested in bringing him in. And then obviously he has had a big injury this year, so we've not seen him play as much. I don't know if that kind of knocks it down. And also he was a big target for Klopp, so I don't know if a new manager would also want him. Lamine Yamal, I mean, we know Barca have kind of finance issues. Liverpool do have money. They were willing to spend over 100 million on Caicedo in the summer, and in the end they didn't spend that. Another one I thought was quite interesting, Leroy Sané.
Yeah.
A little bit older.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, playing against Arsenal yesterday in the Champions League. Mm-hmm. Do you think he would, if Liverpool hadn't brought in someone like Leroy Sané, would that be kind of enough to kind of replace Salah?
I don't think he'd be as good.
No, yeah, of course.
But yeah, I think that would placate the fans. I mean, I don't think I'd personally do it, and I don't think Liverpool will do it. Like, unless
Who would you do?
Unless the price was insanely good. I really think it depends. Like, I mean, I'd be totally fine with going and getting somebody who's just like pretty good, like Rafinha off Barcelona, if the price is really price is nice.
Pedro Neto?
No,
issue there.
I don't think I would. Yeah,
Really?
The injuries worry me.
Injuries
too much.
is the issue.
But like. But I don't know. It's not like the left wing is like completely nailed down. You know, it's not like, oh wow, nobody else could possibly play here. Like, I mean, you want it, I guess, to be Luis Diaz when he's fit, but like, he also isn't fit all the time.
Yeah,
like, none of these guys are fit all the time. Hakpo, who cares? So I don't know. I would maybe think the question should be, how can we make this attack as good as an attack with Salah without him? And that doesn't mean necessarily we just try and replace him, because, as you said, we can't get a player of that level. Like, they just basically they don't exist, or they're not gettable. So can we go and get Kvaratskhelia? Can we go and get Rafael Leao? Well, to me, a guy who I would look really, really hard at is Florian Wirtz, who I think has been as good as any young player in the world this season. I mean, he's been absolutely staggeringly good. And I think Leverkusen can keep hold of their manager, but I'm not convinced they can keep hold of everybody else.
Oh, God, no, yeah.
And I don't know who they'd be most willing to sell. He's probably the guy they'd be least willing to sell. But if it means they can keep Boniface and Frimpong and, you know, Palacios and like, all these other guys, then maybe you can get him. And he is extremely young. He's got the ability to pull out wide. He's also amazing as a kind of 10/second striker. And I think an attack with him and Szoboszlai and Diaz and guys like Jota and Nunez and Gakpo, I guess. I mean, that is pretty tasty. And I think it's certainly good enough. Your attack doesn't have to be the best in the league.
Yeah.
It has to be among the best in the league. If your defense can improve as well, you just need to make gains. It doesn't matter where the gains come from.
Interesting. You know, someone who I thought, just because I want to see him in the Premier League so badly, and I know he is old, and so the fee would have to be quite low, but someone like Antoine Griezmann would just...
No, come on.
I want to see him in the Premier League.
No, that's just that's such a Man United / Chelsea like kind of signing. Like, it's just not.
I just want to see him in the Prem. But you are right. It would be a poor decision to make for this. Is there any other positions you think? Do you think, as I mentioned earlier, I think a big part of this is what manager you bring in. So if Amorim does come in and he's like, I want to play wing backs, and then they're like, okay, well, we need left wing back. That could be a big thing here too. So it depends on what kind of way that the manager wants to play and if that kind of suited as well. Let me know in the comments below if you think there are any other players Liverpool should be targeting in the summer. We spoke about it then a few times, Pat. Expectations for next season. They're going to be in the Champions League. They're going to have a new manager, no Klopp. Let's say, for instance, let's just say they do sell Salah, but they keep everyone else. What do you think the expectation should be?
They do sell Salah.
They do sell Salah, yeah. Okay,
well actually, no. Even if they don't, even if they don't sell Salah, like I would say that it's like 3rd to 5th.
Okay.
You know, realistically, Man City are Man City. Arsenal, I don't think are going anywhere.
No, very good.
And we'll probably add some players. And I also think Martinelli's had kind of a bad season, and like Arsenal are going to be there.
Definitely.
But when I look at the teams around, like I don't think Villa are going to add the guy who turns them into like title challengers. I don't even know who that guy would be, but I'm not sure he's available to Villa. Spurs, I think actually also it's quite difficult to understand how you're going to evolve that squad. United are a while away. Chelsea, God knows, but they're a mess. Like, I just think Newcastle maybe could come back up, but it looks like they might have to sell to buy. So I just think that realistically, you should say we aim for 3rd. We're probably not going to get 2nd, but we aim for 3rd. 5th would be bad, but not like total calamity. 6th would be pretty bad given the state of the league.
Okay.
Because 5th also is probably going to be a Champions League spot.
Yeah.
So 3rd to 5th, I think, will be absolutely fine. And so long as Liverpool fans are prepared that if they finish 5th and they finish below like Spurs and Newcastle, so long as they're prepared for that, then that's okay.
Okay.
But if you made me bet on where they'd finish next season, right now, I would say my instinct says 3rd. My instinct says 3rd. I'll say 3rd.
And it's always interesting, right? Because say they finish, I don't know, 5th, but 2 points behind 3rd. Sure. Then it looks a little bit different, right? It becomes a little bit more.
Well, or if it's just really, really bunched up, and like City win the league by 20 points, but then Arsenal are 2nd, and 2nd to 5th are all within like 8 points.
Yeah.
Like then everyone will be like, okay,
it is.
Like, we're really close to being like in the title race. Like that's fine. Like Liverpool just have expectations of competing, but so long as they don't have expectations of immediately winning, then that's fine.
And if they can figure out a way to score goals without Mohammed Salah, then that would be a big success, to be quite honest. Yeah. So there it is. That is how you replace Jurgen Klopp.
Oh, we figured it out.
Not the easiest job in the world, and good luck to Liverpool next season because I think they're going to need it. But just before we go, we're going to do a couple of quick fire questions.
All right.
This one comes from Omar Al-Jabi. If Madrid win the Champions League and La Liga, would Jude or Vinny have a stronger case for the Ballon d'Or if England doesn't win the Euros?
Yeah.
As in who has the stronger?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Bellingham probably.
Bellingham, okay.
Probably, yeah, because like I think without him, like he's going to be their top scorer, and without him, like none of those things would have happened. It's also just like a remarkable impact for a player that young to have made. Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends, like the manner in which they win. Like if Vinicius scores like 2 goals and they win like the Champions League final 2-0, then everyone's going to say like,
changes up.
This Vinicius. So I don't know. But I think probably Bellingham.
Probably Bellingham. Okay, I think that's fair enough. Kieran Hughes here. Are there any players from the teams likely to be relegated you think deserve to stay in the Premier League?
Yeah, probably not from Luton. I mean, like Barkley could stay in the Premier League, and probably other guys. Yeah, there's probably some other guys as well, but like not who I'm that bothered about. Like it won't be a travesty if they go down.
Any from Sheffield United?
No, not really.
So the other ones would be, I guess, in Everton. Probably have quite a few actually.
Oh, Everton. I think Onana should probably leave this summer, come what may, because of the financial situation. Yeah. Again, check out my podcast for that. Pete did an interesting profile on him as a defensive midfield option for Liverpool or Manchester United. And of course, we talked a bit about Arsenal as well. He's been linked with all those clubs. I think Onana would probably be the guy. I think they're going to try and sell Calvert-Lewin as well, but I just don't think anyone's going to come in at the level they want. Like, if you're Spurs or someone, or even Arsenal, like, then you're like, I'll pay you like nothing for Calvert-Lewin.
He's so unfit.
Because he's such a... But when he is fit, he's such a different kind of weapon.
Yeah, defo. Maybe he stays more fit when he's off the bench.
But the only club who can afford to buy him is like a club who are just like, we're fine if he's not fit. And also like, we're paying nothing.
Yeah.
And no one's going to pay 40 mil for him to be their like starting centre forward. Unless like West Ham or someone are like, we can rebuild him.
I'm trying to think of Burnley. Do Burnley have a few there?
Yeah, they've got a bunch of young players, but I think Burnley...
I think all of them should just stay and battle in the Championship again.
Burnley signed those guys with the expectation of like, we'll grow as a team and hopefully we'll come back stronger.
Yeah, and then Forest, they've got a few to be fair. Gibbs White would be someone. I wouldn't sign Gibbs White. You wouldn't sign Gibbs White? Not for Arsenal, but for a...
How much money? They've paid such a load of money for him, and he has not been...
But surely
he's actually not been good enough to merit the money they paid for him.
But there would be an expectation if they got relegated that they would... I mean, I also don't think Forest will get relegated, but there'd be an...
Awani is like the guy who like I would take off Forest if you can get him fit. Because again, if you don't pay very much for him, he's actually great when he's fit.
Yeah.
Like if you're like a Palace level side, or even a West Ham level side, then you're just like, if this guy gets fit, he will just bang goals for a couple of months of the season, like which is which is that's not enough for a title-winning side, but it actually is enough for a side that are like on the cusp of the European places. That does quite a lot for you.
I think he's a quality striker.
Villa or someone as a backup striker.
Alanga as well. Actually, I think Alanga's done more.
Alanga's been great
to be, and Morello at the back.
There's tons of talent. There's tons of talent at Forest. So I'd say that those are kind of the guys you look at. Like I'd probably go to Forest, but Forest I also think. Yeah, Forest are going to have to sell. They're all going to have to sell.
Oh, Forest definitely going to have to sell. Jesus. Whatever happens, even if they stay up. But there we have it. That has been today's episode on the Djellab channel. I'll come up with a strand name for this one day. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. If they want to see more of you at home or in real life, where can they go?
You can find my podcast. It's on Patreon. It's on your favourite podcast app, Unseen Incidents. But if you subscribe at Patreon for $6 a month, you get extra episodes. So then you get 4 episodes a month rather than just 2, because we can only do 2 a month because Pete is getting married in 2 days' time and I have children. So
tough life. It'll also be linked in the description below, so make sure you check it out down there. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, then subscribe to the Djellab channel. Like the video, leave a comment on what you thought and on your opinions of Liverpool, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.